You're watching Capital City Sunday.
Welcome back to Capital City Sunday. I'm now joined by Scott Bauer from the Associated Press and Mark Sommerhauser from the Wisconsin State Journal. Thanks for joining me, guys.
You bet.
Great to be with you.
So this week filled with polls, few debates, many debates still to come. I want to first digest a little bit the U.S. Senate debate between Republican Leah Vukmir and incumbent Tammy Baldwin. I think the issues have been the same all along. You got the Toma VA overprescription issue. Healthcare has been a big issue. Threw some immigration tariffs reforms in there. Do we have maybe who won? Who was the one up? I mean, what did you think of it, I guess?
Sure. Well, both candidates say they won.
It's usually how most debates
right.
go. We won. No,
yeah,
we won.
So I think the dynamic in that race is the polls have shown consistently that Leah Vukmir is behind, and she acted like a candidate who's trying to make up some ground. She was on the offensive. She went after Tammy Baldwin on a number of issues. Was very successful, I think, in steering her comments to what she wanted to say, no matter what the question was. Leah Vukmir did. She was really skillful at kind of dictating the way she wanted the debate to go, which in a couple spots put Tammy Baldwin on the defensive, I think. She had a little hard time getting an answer out on a question about abortion. Wasn't maybe as forceful. Definitely was not as forceful as Leah Vukmir was in the debate. And then the question, the converse is, how does that play to somebody when you see Leah Vukmir being very
kind of aggressive?
Aggressive,
yeah.
Right? And Tammy Baldwin's very, she's Tammy Baldwin. She's very kind of even keeled and didn't take that approach. But in terms of the issues, there's really no new ground broken. They're very diametrically opposed on almost everything. They spent a lot of time on healthcare, and they spent a lot of time on Toma. But they really just kind of laid out where they are, and we'll see how that translates.
Now, as you just mentioned, Vukmir's been kind of this underdog in this race. What do you guys think is her best offense in this?
Well, she's certainly been pushing this issue of Baldwin's handling of the Toma VA issue.
Is it resonating with voters, you think?
I think it's tough to tell. That issue is one that's not a new issue. It really cropped up, I think, in 2014. It's been several years now since that issue surfaced. And so, I guess if you're judging by the polls, they wouldn't suggest that there's been a lot of support that's coalesced behind Vukmir. It's kind of since she started pushing that issue more, I would say more forwardly here over the last few weeks. We'll see if it gains any more traction here in the next few.
Also this week filled with polls. We had the NBC Merits poll and a new Marquette Law School University poll. We're going to have one more of the MU poll before the election, but those two polls very different. I'll just spit off the numbers here. In the NBC Merits poll, Evers leads Walker 50-42, but in the MU poll, 47 supported 47 supported Walker. Tony had 46. We know this race is going to be, really close. But I mean, are we trusting the polls? Are we watching the polls closely? I know we do, but what do you guys think about it?
Yeah, it's tough. I think, so NBC Marist, this is the second poll they've done in this race. They did one previously in July. It also showed much larger leads for both of the Democratic candidates than the other polls have shown. So I think that's just something to bear in mind when you're looking at those NBC Marist results. Marquette has consistently shown a pretty close race in the governor's race, and a little more of a lead for Tammy Baldwin in the Senate race. And I think that's sort of the prevailing wisdom right now is kind of where those races are at. But the more polls, the better. I think the more polls you get, the more you can kind of get a broader view of where public opinion might be in those races.
Yeah, just a snapshot, because
Right.
we still got a few weeks to go.
Right.
Speaking of the governor's race, let's just talk a little bit about the issues. It seems like a lot is Walker against Evers is about how he's going to raise all these taxes. One thing specifically is the gas tax. I think the biggest thing most voters want is a solution to fix the roads. Evers is open to raising the gas tax, but we're really unsure of how much he wants to raise it. But Walker's claiming he wants to raise it by $1. Now he's on monitors at gas stations while you're filling up. I actually saw it the other day. What other issues are we going to see in this race, and is it really going to resonate with voters?
Yeah, the taxes issues really come up. It's kind of been the latest attack you've seen from the governor. And Tony Evers, when he was asked about the gas tax the day after he won the primary, he was asked, would you raise it as much as $1? And he didn't say no. when Walker started to attack him on that issue, he said,
I don't know where that came from.
He said, you're right. He said that I'm not going to raise it $1. That's a lie. It's ridiculous. I would never go that high. The gas tax right now is 32.9 cents, I think, per gallon. Raising it $1 would make it by far the highest in the country. But what Tony Evers has said repeatedly is that he wants to rework the tax structure. He wants to redo the income tax brackets to make them more fair for the middle class. He wants to do away with the agriculture manufacturing tax credit, which primarily affects large corporations. He wants to potentially raise the gas tax to pay for roads. So these are all things that he has said, and these are things that the governor is, as you mentioned, on ads on the gas tank pump, talking about ads on TV. It seems like it's really, and Walker allies are running ads on these issues. So he's really focused on the tax stuff, whereas Tony Evers a lot more is talking about the ACA and health care.
Yeah, and Evers also has talked about reworking the income tax code to potentially actually give a tax break or tax cut of some type. He hasn't been really specific about that, but he's talked about some sort of a tax break for lower income people. So, you know, he's signaled an openness to a lot of different tax changes. The gas tax issue is definitely one that Walker has zeroed in on. At no point has Evers broached the idea of $1 increase. As Scott mentioned, that's something that kind of came from an exchange with reporters at a press conference back in August. Evers has signaled some openness to some kind of a gas tax increase. That's the main way that we pay for roads and bridges here in Wisconsin. But he hasn't indicated, you know, how much he would be willing to do that.
Now, Evers is also throwing out a lot of proposals, a lot of new ideas, some that are kind of broad. Of course, everything sounds good when it comes out of your mouth, but if you're not going to give details of how much it will cost, you know, we're kind of, it's like that gray area there. Some new things that he released is wants to reduce prescription drug costs, also expanding senior care. This is, I mean, where is Walker on senior care compared to Evers?
So Walker's had an interesting history with senior care. It's a program that keeps prescription drug costs low for senior citizens. It requires a federal waiver to operate outside of the Medicare Part D program. Walker, in his first budget and a subsequent budget, attempted to essentially do away with senior care and have applicants first apply for Medicare Part D and then go through a senior care type program. That got rejected by the legislature. In more recent years, the governor has talked about bolstering senior care. This year, he attempted to get a waiver that would be continuous, so you wouldn't have to keep reapplying, which didn't really work out. But so he's been more supportive of senior care recently. Tony Evers knows it's a popular program, and he wants to make flu shots covered under senior care. You know, really what this gets back to is the polls showing that health care is one of the most important issues for voters this year. Ensuring that protection for pre-existing conditions is a major issue for people. And that's what Tony Evers is really focusing on, and forcing Walker to kind of do this dance of, he wants to repeal Obamacare, but he also wants to keep parts of the law that are the most popular. So that's kind of where a lot of the debate is focusing.
And I was just say, you know, what Evers is doing with the healthcare focus is part of a pattern that you're seeing from Democratic candidates up and down the ticket this cycle. I mean, they just really are hammering the healthcare issue. I think they're looking at polls that suggest in a lot of places voters do trust Democrats a little more to deal with the healthcare issue. And, you know, Evers is sort of taking a state tack on it, but you're seeing the same thing from Tammy Baldwin in the U.S. Senate race. She's talking more at the federal level, of course, in the U.S. Senate. And then even state legislative candidates that are Democratic candidates, we're hearing them talk a lot about the healthcare issue this cycle.
In almost every race, healthcare is a big focus.
Yeah.
That's all the time we have. Thanks so much, guys, for joining me.